Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. About how. Let's. Hello?
Hello.
Hi. I started hearing it like in stereo. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. My wonderful colleague and friend, Lisa Logan, has joined us tonight as not so surprise. I invited her to come, but I wasn't 100% sure, so I didn't want to, put her on the marquee and have you all excited, only to have your hopes dashed. So she's here. I'm very excited. And for those of you, first of all, those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe to this broadcast. Share with other parents who need to learn about SEL, social emotional learning, in our kids' public schools, even in private schools. It's everywhere. But you probably don't, well, I'm going to say probably. If you're new to the channel and you don't know me, then chances are you might not know Lisa. So I'm going to have Lisa introduce herself because she had a big win this week in her work. And I want her to introduce who she is, what she's doing, and what her great win is, because it is proof that one person can make a huge difference. So go.
Oh, thank you so much, Deb. Well, I'm Lisa Logan. I'm first and foremost a mother, which is why I'm involved in this fight. And when I saw that social emotional learning had come to my kids' school, I was like, what is this? Where does it come from? Why is it now transformative? And as I started to go down rabbit holes, I knew that I couldn't be quiet. I knew that I had to become a voice and to educate parents. So I've been doing that over at my YouTube channel, Parents and Patriots, and I am Lisa Logan on Twitter. And I never expected to kind of be a voice for this. This is something I kind of tripped and fell into, but I'm glad to be here. And the win that I had this week was, I've been exposing a lot of stuff that's been going on in our curriculum. And one of the things I discovered after that accuracy in media video come out, and actually I discovered it beforehand, I knew it was the perfect time to release these webinars I had found. One of them was a educator in the Jordan School District here in Utah, basically encouraging other educators to use social emotional learning to teach critical race theory. And the other one that I found, which got the most attention, as it usually always does, was educators being indoctrinated into gender identity and gender ideology stuff, and then being encouraged to push that in their classrooms. So I got the local news involved, so much so that that video was taken down. And also now our governor has said he's going to launch an investigation into all of these state agencies, because particularly they used CARES Act money meant to help relief in our state to push this propaganda on our teachers.
And it was right. Yeah. CARES Act. That's COVID. That's how, this is not news. SEL. Let's say like, oh, this is new. They're trying to claim, aren't they, Lisa, that, well, the kids are so mentally upset because of it that they need extra help. Right.
Oh, yeah. Every time you put any kind of real truth in front of them about social emotional learning, their argument is, but if we take it away, they're going to all commit suicide. And I would venture to say that I think a lot of the collectivism and the, identity and belonging stuff that they do in telling kids that, if you're white, you have implicit bias, I think that causes more mental damage than some of the stuff that happens at school.
Right. Exactly. So I want to ask the audience, can you guys hear me pretty clearly? Like I'm talking through this mic and not through my computer? I want to make sure, because I had to set up a mic so that we can play the video that we're going to play. And I want to make sure it's all set up correctly and you hear everything you're supposed to hear. Awesome. Okay. So here's my sword. I've showed it to some of you before. It's actually a letter opener, but it's my swords up sword. Go mom. Go Lisa. We're so proud of you. We're so happy to know you. And we parents owe you. So hopefully this will spread. Hopefully other governors will take note. But even if they don't, folks, if you're watching from states that are not Utah, which you probably are, please use this as a template. Right, Lisa? When you say like you can go to Lisa's Substack, you can look at what she's said about SEL. You can go through your school district's information, find out if SEL is there, and you can ask for an audit as well. Now, you may not get it, but I mean, the point is you don't ask, you don't get. You don't bring things to their attention, they may not know. They don't assume they know. What I'm learning is even in the so-called red states, these politicians are at least 5 years behind, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly more than that. But I mean, I'm being kind. They're years behind. So you may have to bring it to their attention. You have to be the citizen alert that says, hey, found this at my kid's school, and here's why it's a problem. And if you can explain why it's a problem, or you can show them what she showed them, it was, I mean, I hope it's self-explanatory. But if it's not,
Right.
then you can explain.
Well, and I just wanted to segue just by saying a little bit, if you don't know how to do that, almost every school district has a board docs, and you go in there, and in the search, you're looking for their purchasing contracts. So they have, usually there's one big one that has all of them at the end of the year. And so you'll see exactly how much money they gave to each of these entities and for what. And so if you do a little digging, you may find a professional development, just like I did, that teaches teachers these ideologies. So I would start there.
Right. Perfect. So that's our big announcement. That was, welcoming her. And I hope it's now obvious why I've asked her to be here to help me do what I'm going to do, or what we're now going to do, which is go through a video that was sent to me by a parent, one of my wonderful whistleblowers. Here it is. And you'll notice the title is Assault on Social Justice and SEL in Our Schools. Assault. Have you noticed how much they love using the language of violence when referencing parents? Parents who are concerned and at this point begging for transparency, voicing their concern, saying, hi, remember us? They're our children. Just, in case you forgot, because it seems like you did. They refer to what we do as assault. It's violent. As if this applies to me, Lisa, tell me if you agree. They feel like they have a right to do anything they want, really, like any pedagogy, any program they want. If you don't like it or have criticisms, it's an assault. It's, oh my God, they're attacking us. It sounds so much like those people who say, like, you're attacking me with harmful whatever if you don't do what I want. It's very toddler-esque, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And even if you watch this whole video, you'll notice that they're just like, well, these parents, they just haven't been taught SEL. And maybe, it's good that these kids are coming home and telling them about the things they're learning at school. And maybe if we do this for enough generations, we'll turn the key. But, it really, they view parents as stupid, and especially for not getting on board with all of this equity stuff that they want to teach that we're going to learn about.
Right, exactly. And you'll never see them come and say, oh, okay, we now understand. We're sorry, parents. We should have explained it better. That's on us, because, we're the supposed experts and you're the parents, and it's really our imperative to explain it to you and win you over and get you on board using something called persuasion and reason. Oh, that's right. We don't use reason because that's rooted in whiteness. I keep forgetting.
No. So and in fact, it's so funny when they talk about getting stakeholders on board and being more effective in their messaging in this video, they literally say that they need, because, if it's one teacher in one school trying to push this, they don't have power. What we need to do is get the teachers' unions on board, not the parents. We need to get the teachers' unions on board so that they can wield their control in the education system.
That's right. They need to engage them. Today's words wokeism was engagement. And they want to engage everyone except you parents. They don't really want engaged parents. The only engaged parents they want are cheerleaders. Go SEL. So, okay. So we're going to hear from this, let's just quickly look at this description here. The Newsweek headline reads, social emotional learning becomes latest battleground in school curriculums. The article goes on. The term SEL refers to the social, emotional, and character development of children, according to Dr. Maurice Elias. We're going to hear from him, a professor in the psychology department at Rutgers University, one of the most far left leaning universities like in the country at this point, who has written several books on the subject. Elias began his work on SEL in the 1970s. I hope that scares all of you. It should, because that tells you how long this has been going on. But the skills and development it entails weren't referred to as social emotional intelligence. Notice how he subtly changed it to social and emotional intelligence. We're getting into that woo-woo stuff about there's different kinds of intelligence. No, there isn't. Just put that out of your head. If you're still laboring under the delusion that there's something called EQ or there's the different kinds of intelligences, no, there isn't. There's intelligence. We all have the capacity to learn using all of our different faculties, unless, of course, we are literally deaf and can't see or, whatever have. But we have the capacity to learn using all of these multi-sensory. It works well for a lot of people. We just have preferences like every other person who prefers to do things a certain way. But they've done tests with students and found that while learning something in a multi-sensory way can help a lot of kids because it gives you extra input, for some kids, it's too much noise. It's too sensory overload, right? So we have preferences as individuals and we have preferences in our different age ranges. That's not the same thing as having a different kind of intelligence, nor does it mean that you need specialized training to develop your specific kind of intelligence. No. If you grow up, and we can argue that some kids who grow up in chaotic households without a lot of love and affection or proper attachment, they may have problems with social and emotional skills. Remember that word skills? Remember we used to use it? We don't use it anymore because it's too white. But anyway, so
competency now, Deb, get it right.
It's competencies. I keep forgetting competent. We're competent. We're not skilled. But those are things you learn by observing the people around you who are older, been here longer, and presumably have good ones. You watch other people. How do they socialize? How do they meet people? How do they talk to people? Do they face people, show eye contact? And then, of course, kids who are not neurotypical have an extra difficult time for other reasons. But that doesn't mean that you can replace that with a class, or you can replace that with some total stranger in a school where there's authority and you're subordinate and there's exercises. No, you can't replace a loving household with the government, and you can't use a pedagogy to replace parents. You just can't do it. And it's one thing to say we need something for those poor kids and we're going to pull them out and do something. I grant you, something needs to happen, ideally with a properly trained clinician. But we don't take all the children who do have parents who love them and are teaching them social and emotional behaviors by modeling the way it's usually done. Okay. And we don't say, we presume you don't have that, and we're going to come in and supplant that. And that's assuming you had good intentions for them to just be decent human beings who have good manners. That's not what SEL is it, Lisa?
No, definitely not. And honestly, when I had kicked Second Step out of our district, thank goodness, you'll learn about Second Step in a minute as well. A lot of the school board members were just like, you know what, honestly, if we don't have SEL for a while, just send them out to play. They learn a lot more sometimes on the schoolyard. They can learn in a 20-minute SEL lesson.
That's right. That is exactly right. So let's, because this is long and I want to try to get through as much of it as possible. So let's just start. As I always do, I'm going to ask the audience to please somebody raise their hand and let me know that the sound is coming through okay for you, because I'm playing it on that special mic. So let's get going. And what I guess we'll do is we'll stop periodically, or where there's something we obviously have to respond to. Lisa, if I haven't stopped and you have something to say, just say stop. And I'll stop. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm delighted that Maurice Elias is joining us today. The title is The Assault on Social Justice and Social Emotional Learning in Our Schools, Community Psychology Practice Implications. And I think we've all been horrified just watching the attacks on critical race theory and other issues. And now it's right smack in our laps with the attack on social emotional learning, which I always have thought is one of the great programs that Roger Weisberg and Maurice developed years ago and has spread all across the country, and is a perfect example of community psychology taking a model, developing it, disseminating it, and having a huge impact in the country. So
What? Community, first of all, community
psychology. Yeah.
Community psychology. Are we rats in a colony? Like, I mean, we're
apparently
we're individual people with individual liberty, and we're talking about community psychology. So right away, parents, that might have just blown right by you, but I want you to just hang out there for a second. Community psychology. So there's that. Second thing is, one of the great programs is spread all over the country and having a big impact in the country. Is that their mandate? Is that the job of schools? Is it the job of school to practice psychology on the community? Any part of the community as a group? Is it their job to do any kind of psychology on your individual child without your consent, without your knowledge, without a clinician in the room, without somebody who's actually trained and licensed in child psychology to deal with your specific child's issues? No, it is not their mandate. That is probably not what any of you parents thought that you were signing up for when you registered your child for school. So, anything else to add that? Or would you keep
I just want to say, is it the job? Not just no. Hell no. It is not the school's job to practice psychology on your child.
And I know there might be people saying, well, but what about? It really comes down to core principles. Okay. You can come up with a what about for all kinds of little individual people. He's not talking about individuals. And in the United States of America, we don't treat everyone as if they have a problem that one person has, if they are guilty of something that one person did. We don't do that here. We have rights, and children in particular, what we would call that in the case of a child, treating a child as if they're a member of a group or they're not themselves, is a form of emotional abuse.
Yes.
Once upon a time, that was classified as emotional abuse via projection. You don't do it. No decent clinician would ever do that because it's unethical. So the hell no is definitely hell no. There is no what about. If you want something like this, you can get it for your individual child. You can go hire a clinician. You can do what you want, or you want to establish a charity to handle the kids who have issues. Have at it. But this is not to be done the way that they're doing it across the whole country for everybody. All right, let's continue.
It's, very hard to see this happening now. And I thought it'd be a great occasion for us to talk about this with Mo. He was quite willing. He decided he'd like to structure this as a conversation. So I'll leave that in his hands. Mo is a professor of psychology department at Rutgers. He's the director of the Rutgers Social, Emotional, and Character Development Lab and academic director of the Collaborative Center for Community-Based Research and Service at Rutgers. He's a past president of SCRA. He's been active in prevention forever. And I'm just delighted to turn it over to Mo, who will have the next hour, and we expect others to join us, but we'll just let it go at that. If you'd like to go around and have introductions, I'm happy to have you do that, but I'll leave that to you, Mo.
Yeah, that would be great.
Everybody introduce themselves. You can probably skip over that part.
Skip this. There's a bunch of people.
So I'll call out
so
names.
Now we're going to go. There's
really a pleasure to be gathering with community psych folks. I've been teaching community psychology at Rutgers now for about 42 years at the undergraduate and graduate levels. My students all know the name Tom Wolfe. They know it very well. And when I told them I was going to actually be speaking with Tom Wolfe on Zoom, they were very excited because they've been reading stuff about what Tom has done. So I just want to share a little bit about this miserable situation that's affecting us in the country. And I just want to share a few things about how I think about this from my perspective as a community psychologist, or maybe another way of saying it is, how has community psychology led me to think about this? And I also want to encourage you, having taught remotely for the past 2 years, I'm a big fan of the chat box. So if you have observations or questions or an important shopping list you want to put into the chat box, please feel free to do so. I think there's a great parallel process that we can have.
Nauseating,
Logistic to the conversation.
He really is. I'm sorry. but we know it's coming, so let's keep going.
So social emotional learning took an interesting turn when CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, which is really the lead organization for this field, talked about transformative SEL. Now, this may seem like like a little thing, but it's not a little thing. CASEL redefined SEL to include an emphasis on equity. And while you and I might think, well, that's a good thing, there are people around the country who don't think it's a particularly good thing. And it speaks to what happens when we make assumptions that everyone shares the same values as we do. And so
you mean like when we assumed sending our children to the public school that you actually like America, that you actually respect the Constitution?
Yeah, I have to start getting my tissues, man, because this is such a tragedy. I was like, oh man, they're gonna cry.
We don't share their values.
Yeah.
You assume everyone shares your values. Well, when you wrap yourself in your little bubble world where everybody, like is working towards this socialist utopia that doesn't exist, and you forget that there are plenty of people in this country who, we got issues with the country. We don't like everything, but we're okay with the Constitution. In fact, we like it back. Can we have it back? Can we use it again? Can we not use it as paper? Like for the nose to blow in? I mean, that just blew me away. We assume everyone shares their values. I'm like, yeah, that's actually something we should be able to do as parents because we pay for the schools.
Right.
We pay them. We can hire you.
Yeah, and he said something else very important there that all of your audience should pick up on is that he said that CASEL changed they're the main purveyor of social emotional learning. They basically set the standards, they set the definition of SEL, they changed that in 2020 for those of your audience that doesn't have that foundational knowledge. They have been around since 1994. Pushing what we think of as beautiful and nice and kind, the nice version of SEL, right? Where we're actually building identity in kids and teaching them how to be nice to other people. And then they totally shifted to have this equity lens, which is where we're seeing all of this stuff through transformative SEL, where they're teaching elements of critical race theory, elements of comprehensive sexuality education and social justice to our kids. And basically anything that they cannot get past through law or through code, they get in through the back door through social emotional learning. So I think just want for your audience to know that when he's talking about that shift, that is that shift, and that happened in a big way. They were explicitly saying they were doing it, although this was being cooked up for a while in 2020.
Lisa, do you know the answer to this question? Who made CASEL the one to set the standard? I mean, I know in recent years, the White House or the Department of Ed chose them to be the standard for these CARES Act funds and ESSER funds and things that were going for mental health. They said that whatever program you devised or whatever you chose to do, it had to be CASEL compliant. So they were like the standard. But before that, what is it? Just because they were first to come up with this collaborative?
Well, no, so they were lobbyists, and you have to understand that some of the early people involved with SEL, like Linda Darling Hammond, who's now a bigwig in California, she was involved with a bunch of organizations that they literally got together and said, let's change what we measure in schools. And she's one of the board members of CASEL. And so I think that kind of started that conversation. And she actually was served on the transition team when Obama became president. And she wasn't picked as the ed secretary, Arne Duncan was. But she had a huge influence in passing the Every Student Succeeds Act, which then says we have to measure these things, these social emotional skills in students and schools and districts and stuff. So there's a lot of players involved, but I think that they just were the main lobbyist for SEL for a long time, and they were tied in with some pretty big organizations.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I mean, I do know, Adrian, that like the Fetzer Institute, where they sort of had their first meeting, was at the Fetzer Institute.
Yes.
And they were involved. The guy who came up with this whole EQ thing, Goldman, he was at that first meeting. So he came up with this bogus nonsense. It really is woo. It's not a thing. I hope everyone hears me when I tell you that, like, because it's been talked about so much. Like they've had books about it. What's your EQ? Test your EQ. EQ is more important. Did you know that EQ is more important than actual IQ? It is made up. You might as well say your sun sign is more important than your intelligence. I mean, it's about that legit. So that's what we know about that. Okay, let's continue.
So when all the furor was raised about critical race theory, SEL, in essence, inadvertently put a target on its own back with transformative SEL and allowed an implicit alliance to be made between SEL and critical race theory. And so what's important to recognize is that the folks who are against SEL don't know anything about SEL, couldn't care less about SEL. But see, SEL is a potential club to use to beat on folks who are in favor of conversations about diversity, inclusion, equity, etc.
Dude.
I know. It's so ridiculous. Like, it's because you didn't know anything about SEL. Actually, the more that I learned about SEL, the more those associations became not just implicit, but explicit.
Implicit. They did it. While it's true they put a target on their back when they did that, they were always going to do that. That was always the plan. And before the ink was dry on transformative, they were going to culturally, what's the new one? It's not
culturally responsive teaching or culturally responsive social emotional learning. That's the thing they're going to change it to try to have it not be transformative anymore.
They're making it more explicitly critical race theory, critical social justice, critical gender theory. They're all critical theories. They all divide the world into groups according to power and privilege. Of course, they have, arbitrarily assigned these based on categories of people they know will create a furor as far as, social norms, because they're trying to tear it all down. So the people who know anything about SEL, no, actually, we know plenty about SEL, and that is why we don't want it. You can't keep pretending that we don't know. They said this about CRT. They say they don't know what CRT really is until we finally said enough that made it clear we did know what CRT was. Then they said, well, you're just a bigot.
Yeah,
so we don't know what it is.
Right? We're not doing it until you find out that they are doing it. And now they're shifting the narrative to, well, now it's good that we're doing it.
Yeah, it's good that we're doing it because, look, you're such a bigot. You were against it. It's a giant Kafka trap. The whole thing is a Kafka trap. Well, of course you would hate it. That's exactly what a racist would do. It's like, you said it wasn't even there. Who does that? That's called a liar.
Oh, you just wait until later when this lady comes on and she's like, the reason these people don't like this is because, these white supremacists, they just don't want to let go of their power. I can't tell. I was just telling Deb audience right before we went on that I think when I was listening to this podcast, I think I literally shouted expletives like many times. And I'm not the kind of person to just do that in my car when I'm listening to something. But yeah, this webinar made me angry.
And one of the things that I think Tom and I remember, and Susan as well, from many years is our concern about levels of analysis in community psych. And it is very important to see that this is not about SEL. This is about much, much bigger issues.
About white supremacy.
And vexing issues, which I'll talk about in just a moment.
Vexing.
So from my perspective, one of the things that thinking preventively, as some of us have felt the importance of spreading SEL nationwide. And by that, I mean making sure that when we educate our children, that in every school, in every part of the country, we are systematically trying to build their social and emotional competence for all kids. And
That is not your job. It is
No.
not your business.
Mhm.
You can't do it. Quite literally, it is not possible. So you shouldn't try, because you are interfering with the parent-child relationship. You are colonizing the child's brain,
Yeah.
quite literally. They're so anti-colonial, right? They're colonizing. They're saying whatever it is that was your indigenous culture, your parents, your language, your family life, your religion, whatever it is, no. We need to teach you our version of social emotional skills so you all have the same ones. What I want everybody to hear him say is not, it's important because we genuinely believe that the entire population of children in America has no social skills and they aren't going to have them any other way. He is saying we want them to have the same social skills. And you know what those social skills are? Agreeing with us. That's the social skill. The social skill is having those values that he was so shocked that everyone didn't have. Yeah, he doesn't like that. He doesn't want to live in a place, or does he want his kids to live in a place where the other people get to have different values? Heaven forfend.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. No, I mean, the whole purpose of SEL is to create a critical consciousness in children. That's all. And it's to change their worldview away from what they were born with their parents and have been cultivated throughout their family life into their Marxist version of how they should see the world.
And you know, these people actually look you in the eye and say, no, you're wrong. That's not it. We just don't want them to grow up to be racist. And like, do you understand? The sunk premise there is that you assume all their parents are racist. You assume that people don't agree with you because they're bad people. You assume there's only one way to think that makes one a good person, and it's your way. And so when you say, we just don't want them to be bad people, it's like, who the hell are you to define what that is? If I'm not trespassing against your rights, I'm not bothering you in any way, shape, or form. I just think different thoughts. I have a different worldview than you, but I'm otherwise obeying the law, respecting your rights, and going on about my business. Remember coexist? What happened to coexist? Mm-hmm. Coexisting is no longer good enough, guys. You can't just exist over there. Mr. Elias, Professor Elias, Dr. Elias doesn't want that. He wants to make sure that, you know, he gets to you and your kids so they don't think like you, they think like him.
Right. It's not coexist, it's cooperate or the fist.
Yes. Thank you. Exactly right.
And you know, it's not an issue what they believe, or, you know, that every kid deserves this in the same way that every kid deserves nutrition, right? We don't.
So you're not feeding your children this information. What do we do? We birth our children and then we like abandon them all day? They're not around people. What about those lovely daycare workers that work for the state? What about the other people who are raising them till they go to school? Are you suggesting they're just like sitting in a room alone staring at the walls?
I think so.
No one is capable of this but you and the people you trained. How do you feel, parents? You're completely incapable. You know, I was a parent. I am a parent. I have 3 children. This is me with my children. Like, oh, look, it's a pet. Oh, what are we doing? We're putting on our shoes. Like, you narrate their day. Go to the grocery store, see a mom with her baby. Go any place, see a dad playing catch with his kid, whatever. Parents, caregivers, even if it's not a parent, it's a grandparent, it's a babysitter, it's somebody. They're talking to the child. They're not all suffering, you know, like that whatever that is, that the orphan kids are just sitting in the crib and they can't do anything. Why don't you go to one of those countries and do that where the kids literally need this, but you don't want to because that's not what your goal is.
Selectively put fluoride in our water. Everybody gets it, right?
Some of us don't want that either.
Universal prevention, we know this. So we started an organization called SEL for US. SEL for you, and the number 4. I'll just put it in the chat box, actually, make it easy.
So interesting, ladies. He's putting that in the chat box.
And the idea of this organization, selforus.org, was to anticipate the fact that if we're going to actually disseminate anything nationwide, there has to be some strong local proponents of it. And organizationally, there has to be some entity that can help network and keep people from reinventing the wheel. So SEL for US consists of what are now 20 state alliances. And each of these state alliances are designed and dedicated to promoting social emotional learning in schools among parents in communities. Just the idea that every child deserves to have those social emotional competencies.
I really can't stress this enough, you guys. This language is intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Every child deserves. Implication, they're not getting.
Right.
Why is there so much urgency to do this if he's not implying there's no other way for them to get it? So when they go into a community, as he points out, and they tell parents, every child deserves this, you get a slew of parents going, oh dear, children aren't getting this. Every parent thinks that they're doing it. So they're imagining other parents not doing it. But guess what? They're all imagining not the people who support it or imagining other parents not doing it. It is up to you to go to the other parents in your community, get in touch with them and make it clear to them that whoever it is they imagine is not parenting their kids. If it's you, you are doing the job. So they're imagining imaginary people. Okay. And if they can't pinpoint exactly who these kids are that deserve and are not getting this and treat them accordingly, they need to butt out of your business. But they need to stop advocating, evangelizing for, raising money for, going to school board meetings and begging for something that he has yet to prove is necessary. Every child deserves is not evidence.
Well, and then the next step from that, Deb, is the scary one, right? Because what they're not saying is not that every kid's not getting SEL. They're not getting the SEL that they want them to have. Therefore, when you talk about having this assault on SEL and this abusive language, it'll eventually be that parents who don't provide their version of social emotional learning to their kids are not contributing to their children's well-being, and therefore they need to step in and make sure either through parent education that they get that they kind of force mandate that through the parents or through the schools or the community schools that are coming, because they want to take away parents' rights altogether and have children advocate for their own rights. So that's the next scary step.
And it's not eventually, it's happening already.
Yes.
There are already parents who've come under scrutiny, been added to lists, been locked out of their schools, been told they can't come to the school, they can't come on the property of the school, whatever, because they've raised too many concerns. And I'm not talking they've gotten violent. They've just raised too many concerns about this. And then some of them are being investigated as if not wanting what he's selling makes you suspect.
Absolutely.
And because we know from the data, right, that in the absence
the data, what data weren't you showing
of
to us?
that, kids don't do well in school.
This is what he's doing now is he's taking data that we actually do have about kids who come, again, the kids who come from troubled homes, things are chaotic, they don't have proper attachment, they have psychological problems, documented clinical issues. They don't do well. But part of why they don't do well is that it's school is an extra hard social environment. So it's not like the kid has problems at home and they're coming into an otherwise neutral or very loving and wonderful environment and they're struggling to function because they don't know manners and mores. That's not it at all. You could actually be coming from a loving home and come into a school and struggle because it's like a prison and kids are bullying you and they have all kinds of arbitrary standards. Like you have the wrong skin color and you're this and you're that. And that causes a lot of trauma, not to mention being poked and prodded and asked questions. And when you're 6 years old, told you might be in the wrong body and that your parents might have assigned you the wrong gender. So they're creating, it's iatrogenic. They're creating trauma, then claiming the data shows the kids who don't have the skills to deal with the school environment don't do well in school. But we need to disaggregate this data and put in proper controls. I'm not even a scientist, and I understand that this is not how you gather data on the psychology of anyone, least of all, rapidly developing human minds. I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor. I'm not this guy. I don't have a PhD. I'm just a mom and a teacher. And I know that what he's describing is not reality.
Well, and Jennifer McWilliams makes this point all the time, is that, they say, oh, we definitely did SEL and these kids need to be centered first before they learn. And that's going to contribute to these better academic outcomes, but there's no data to support that. I mean, even pre-COVID, with how many years they had been trying to implement SEL into schools and the ones that had done it for a long time, there is no real evidence that this helps their academic outcomes.
No. And because they've been changing so many things about measuring academic outcomes at the same time, how could we even know? You can't change all the variables and then have a clean study. And that's
No.
on a small scale. They're doing this across the whole country and then claiming it's so essential. No, I'm sorry. You've been at this a long time. You've had plenty of time to come up with some actual data, some actual evidence. And we have enough anecdotal evidence with our own eyes can show us that we have dramatic increases in childhood mental health problems with the ROGD, or rapid onset gender dysphoria, the number of kids who are saying I'm not in the right body, whatever, that is off the rails. Okay, kids shouldn't be that confused about what body they're in. All right, this is supposed to be exceedingly rare. It's now exceedingly common. We have more kids, cutting themselves, harming themselves, beating up on other kids. We saw the story last week of the 8th grader who pummeled a little 8-year-old or 9-year-old girl on the school bus. We're seeing fights every day. SEL's been in the schools all this time, sir.
Yep.
How's that working out? They don't have good social skills. They had better social skills before you implemented this stuff. And I can't even 100% blame it on you, because I'm not you. I'm not the kind of person who takes the single thing I don't like and goes, it's all your fault. But your thing isn't making it better. Demonstrably not making it better. I would argue worse.
Kids are less likely to learn.
They're not taught.
In the same way, we also want schools to be places where kids can experience kindness, caring, compassion, support. Again, all children, not some children, all children. And this is not to say that there aren't things going on in homes and communities and income disparities and all those miserable macro systemic things that are affecting the country. But from our perspective, for 180 school days, maybe 7 hours a day, kids can go someplace where those discrepancies and disparities will be minimized. Not eliminated, obviously, but minimized.
But they're not.
Well, and this is where it's coming, where I'm hearing his argument, because that's why he was saying it needs to be a kind place for all children. It goes back to what Dina Simmons has said, that if you teach SEL without acknowledging that, especially Black children are over-disciplined, and that they grow up in this system that it's systemically racist and institutionally racist, if you teach SEL without acknowledging that, then it's literally called white supremacy with a hug. And so that's where this whole thing is like, we have to teach SEL through this equity lens, or it's just no good.
But what it ends up looking like is chaos.
Mm-hmm.
It ends up looking like chaos. So, it's like so many things. There is a difference between discipline, that they talk about over discipline, and they're being literal and counting numbers. They're saying the number of students sent to the principal's office or the number of students who were suspended. They don't look at why. They're never looking at the reason the student was suspended, the reason the student was sent to the principal's office, the reason the student, had any kind of discipline whatsoever. They just say, oh, 10 of them were, and they were Black, and only 2 were, and they were white. Therefore, they're over disciplined. Well, not if they were beating the living bejesus out of the teacher or the other kids. Okay.
Right. Well, that's excused, Deb, in their eyes, because that child is experiencing trauma. And so therefore they need to have more lenient, kind of a lens of what they're doing, because they have trauma. And I think it's sad because what we're blaming, we're blaming white supremacy and systemic, institutional racism, as the cause of all of that trauma. It might just be that kid doesn't have 2 parents at home. Or maybe they don't have, maybe they're in a lower socioeconomic position, where they have to raise their sibling, and or they live in a neighborhood where there's gunshots all the time. I grew up in a neighborhood where there was gunshots all the time. It's a different feeling to walk down the street and know you may get hit by a stray bullet than to walk down the street and not have to worry about that. And so, right. But that's not because of institutional racism. That's just because you live in a tough neighborhood. And I grew up in a single parent home, and that changes your your perception a little bit of
You know what
life.
institutional racism is? Institutional racism is this.
Yes.
Institutional racism is assuming that a child who's acting out just needs fewer rules. Now you're
Right.
not giving them boundaries or structure that they may desperately need because you haven't decided to take the time and deal with them as an individual. The really compassionate thing to do is get to know that kid on an individual basis and then don't document it for the government and it's like surveys and everything. That's their privacy. If you're actually caring, I don't mean pry into their private life, just observe. When I was in graduate school, I had student taught, and there was a girl in our class. It was a private school, but she was there on scholarship. And she could not sit still. First grade, could not sit still for circle time or do anything, and was just all over the place, could not be disciplined. And I noticed, and I mentioned it to the head teacher. I said, I've noticed something about her. She comes to school every day, and her braid pattern on her hair is different every day. I said, doesn't that take a long time to do the braids? And my teacher said, it does, I think. I think it takes hours. And we're both white women. So, we don't do it to our own hair. So we were respectful of the fact that we don't know for certain. So I just went to her. I said, hi, your hair looks so pretty, Christy. I've noticed it looks so great. Does that take who does it for you? My mom does. Oh, does it take a long time? Mm-hmm. I said, well, how long does it take? She said, well, I come home from school and I eat, I get in the chair and I do, and she's eating her dinner. She's, like the whole thing from like 3 p.m. till she goes to bed. She was getting her hair done. Now it came to be because her mom was so grateful for the scholarship and so grateful that her child was in the school and so, wanted so badly for her child to make a good impression and be like, really well dressed and everything, that this was what she was doing for her child. She thought she was doing something great and had no idea that it might back up on her, that she was forced to sit still for so long that she might not want to sit still in school. Now, I'd love to be able to adapt to her and not let her run around more. That's a whole other conversation. But what we did was we personalized it. We had a meeting with the mom. And it's, again, the same thing. Like, she's a wonderful kid. Love having her in the class. Just wanted to let you know that she's having some difficulty with sitting and staying on task and so forth. And we just wanted to inquire about how much time she has in the afternoons to move around. How much time does she have at home? We didn't have to go and say, don't braid her hair. We didn't have to be rude. We just wanted to encourage her to give her lots of time to run around and get her energy out and so forth and so on, so that she was able to pay attention. And the mom came up with it herself. She's, oh gosh, I better not do this anymore. And we're like, well, we just wanted to let you know. See change in the kid's behavior. Mom stopped doing it. Kid comes to school, is able to sit down. Now, I mean, that's one example, but I'm just saying that, I was taught, observe your students, listen to them, talk to them as individuals, get down and have a conversation with them and just see what's going on without prying. And you can learn a lot, but assume you don't know anything and you're going to be more open to finding out what the truth is. This guy is going into a situation where they all deserve this and they all deserve these skills and we'll just give it all to them regardless of what's going on and everything will be great. And you're probably misdiagnosing half the class. You're probably mistreating them. You're probably creating problems where none existed before. A good thing can become a very bad thing applied in the wrong situation. And that's assuming you don't have ulterior motives, which I've already talked too much. They do. So let's go.
So SEL for US has these 20 alliances. And it turns out that having these alliances has been really helpful in dealing with this backlash against SEL, because there's already been a vehicle for people to have conversations, get organized around advocacy, and to share strategies. So one of the things that I've learned, how many of you know about Committee for Children? Any of you know about Committee for Children? So Committee for Children is the organization that develops the SEL curriculum Second Step. And Second Step is the most widely used SEL curriculum around the entire world. So there's hardly
2.5 million US children a year.
SEL, Second Step translated.
How many?
20.5 million of United States children. And he's saying right now too, it's also global, that they translate it into other languages.
20 and a half
million. Yeah.
And that powers Committee for Children. And Committee for Children has created a legislative advocacy unit that is absolutely extraordinary.
They're lobbyists.
I bet.
Mm-hmm.
I bet.
Mm-hmm.
They've created a legislative advocacy unit. Did y'all elect these people? I'm sorry. Did you like? No. Okay. Do you like lobbyists for, the NRA? Or, I mean, we hear all the time about, oh, the evil lobbyists for the. How do you feel about this? Okay. It's got a nice name, Committee for Children. But what are they doing? They are lobbying your government to pass laws, to spend your money, to take money, first of all, for the purpose, to spend, to push what is like triangulation with you and your child for Marxist purposes.
Yep.
They have a legislative unit. I mean, to me, this is treason. Like, this is just straight up treason. But I mean, I'm an extremist if I care, so I'm sure they'll come in my comments later, tell me what an extremist I am.
Well, and I want to interject too that, so there's SEL for US, and I saw them mentioned in a 2019 document or letter they sent to almost all governors, trying to get them to implement social emotional learning. It was like, I mean, if you look at the letter, it's like literally a list of like the who's who of SEL organizations all pushing this Marxist stuff. And then I also want to mention, there's one that they do not mention in this webinar called SEL for EDU, for EDU, and that is an alliance between Microsoft and Committee for Children, which they just mentioned, and they have a Facebook page you should all visit on Facebook, and basically you can see a lot of the posts there, and in one of them, they're talking about how they had social justice stuff and Minecraft. They were asking a lot of the educators to send in submissions because Karenga, the Global Alliance for SEL, was having this big event, and they wanted to highlight different ways that educators were using social emotional learning to push social justice activism in the classroom. So, of course, yeah, be aware of these organizations and groups of people because they are the ones pushing SEL and gathering up all the school counselors and the psychologists and everything else to really make this a thing in your school district.
Of course. This is fascinating right here. Paper titled From the Sky, Students Taking Action Together, Teaching Techniques to Cultivate SEL, Civic Engagement, and a Healthy Democracy. I'm sorry, sir, are you a psychologist or a political activist? Very confused.
Political activist, yeah.
Okay, good to know. But it would fool people. He's got these little like puppy eyes and his glasses, and he looks like a little, he looks so benign.
And this unit, headed up by Jordan Passamentier, has taken a lead role in monitoring what is happening around SEL and CRT across the United States.
Is he monitoring me?
And through the
Hi,
SEL
sir.
for US network, makes this information available to lots and lots of people. And so this becomes a very powerful sort of exemplification of our community psychology value of collaboration that none of us could do. I mean, I'm not an expert on legislative advocacy. I wouldn't know exactly how to get started to be truly effective. I mean, I could do something small, but something small is not what's called for here. And so it turns out that that folks made a big deal about what's going on in Indiana and developed some materials that that I just want to share with you briefly. Tom, can I have screen share privilege?
Jadwiga, I think you're the one who can do that. I'll try, but I think it requires.
You should be able to.
Okay, we'll see you in a second.
Yes, you got it. Thank you.
Can you see a fact sheet?
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks to the folks at Committee for Children collaborating with SEL for Indiana, they developed this fact sheet about the bill that is being put forth in the legislature in Indiana, and I just want to show you a couple of things about it that I think are important and interesting. So if you take a look at this, HB 1134 creates an irreconcilable conflict for Indiana educators. So there are already things on the books in Indiana about how you're supposed to educate your children. And so, so some of the things that are being asked now of teachers are things that are already in violation of statutes within Indiana about education. And this doesn't seem to trouble anybody. And so if you take a look at the bold print about the fact that events like Tulsa, the March of Native Peoples, George Floyd's murder, that these are events that should cause discomfort and anguish, that it's almost impossible to teach anything about these events and avoid discomfort or anguish. And yet this is what teachers are expected to do.
I am not going to say that I think the bill or the law is worded very well, because I don't. I don't like laws that include words like anguish. I mean, that's just not what you base legislation on. You should be basing legislation on, whether or not the material is age appropriate, whether or not it is, covering a subject that they need to, they really should instead be much more clear, like nothing shall be taught to the students that puts one group of people above another group of people, or specifically targets by race anyone for shame, or or anything like that. We're just not going to talk about our students in the classroom based on their race, as if one is, suffering and one is not, or one is good and one is not. We're not going to use words like oppressed about the kids today. So in other words, if you want to talk about slaves were oppressed. Yes, of course. You want to talk about the Tulsa Massacre, of course. But when they're going and talking to a small child and saying, white people today, you white child are an oppressor, and they want to use an intersectional matrix and take a kid in elementary school and describe them as a victim or describe them as an oppressive person. That's what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent critical theory from entering the K-12 classroom as a worldview through which the students are taught and see themselves. It's really that simple. We don't want a critical theory worldview taught to our kids, because it divides people into groups by power and privilege. There's always somebody on top making that decision. It's not equality under the law. It supports this notion of equal outcomes and equity, which is absolutely antithetical to equality under the law. It's un-American, and we're not going to teach that way. But the way they're writing these bills is very, like, it gives him all kinds of room to move, like anguish and a discomfort, and teaching does involve some discomfort. Learning involves some discomfort.
Right.
But
well, and I think the other thing, I think the other thing to note too is you said that this kind of contradicts with existing law, and you'll hear him say in a second, one of the reasons why is because ethnic studies, for instance, is mandated by Indiana law. And so, I mean, if you think about that for a second, right, basically what he's saying is that ethnic studies teaches elements of critical race theory and divisiveness and all of these elements you just spoke about, Deb. And so I think that's another point, when Deb and I have come out really hard against school choice, it doesn't solve a lot of these problems. SEL is pretty much mandated by law in many states. And I think it's important to realize that we need to start undoing a lot of these laws that have literally made SEL the center of our education world now.
But now you know how these laws get passed in the first place. You've got these political action groups, these lobbyist groups. It's a wonderful group. Well, sir, Here's the problem with your wonderful group. You think yours is wonderful because you agree with it. You agree with what they're doing. But understand that there's going to be the other side is going to have theirs, and they put in place laws that read like this, or they put in place multicultural or ethnic studies, and that conflicts with this, and this conflicts with that. Meanwhile, you get kids who can't read.
Right.
You've got kids who can't read. And you guys are having, this is why people say, Deb, why are you a public school abolitionist? Why are you a separation of school and state? Why do you support that? This is why. Because when the government, using your tax dollars, has any say in the education of your children, it becomes politicized by definition. You're going to have people voting. You're going to have political lobbyists, and they're going to be vying for your money and power and to put their people into power so they get their wishes pumped into the schools. There's no way around it. Right, left, center, it doesn't matter. You're going to have whatever way the political wind is blowing is going to be taught to your kid. And as a nonpartisan person, I don't want that. I don't think that education should be political action. It should be education. Now, it just so happens right now it's dominated by the left, but is the answer to flip it around in 180 degrees and have it be, all right-wing education? No, they're little kids. They're little kids. So what's cracking me up is the guys going through a wonderful group. We have these 20 alliances in the states, and then we got these action committee. This got that way because somebody else's political action thingy, whatever, got it this way, sir. You don't get that you're part of the problem. Anyway, sorry. Okay, we can continue.
If you take a look at it, the next line, HB 1134 contradicts school improvement provisions already in the Indiana statute. Indiana is one of the first states in the nation to mandate ethnic studies in high school. How can you have ethnic studies without studying what happens to ethnicities?
Better question. Why do you have ethnic studies?
And so this kind of goes on to basically show, if you take a look at the top, the provisions of the bill are drawn directly from Donald Trump's executive order 13950. And it turns out that the same language in the Indiana bill is in all these other bills. So the idea that we're dealing with some sort of a grassroots objective.
Pot calling the kettle black. Pot is calling the kettle black on that one.
An AstroTurf over here. We have these 20 community organizations and they're across the country. And then we have this wonderful legal legislative group that they're going at. Dude, really?
Right.
Actually, the irony is that Donald Trump did his executive order after, what was it, Chris Rufo called him on the phone or something. I mean, like,
Right.
really wasn't all that organized. He's like totally oblivious to this going on. Chris Rufo, maybe some other people, whatever, are like, President Trump. He's like, what the hell? And the only thing the president can do, because he can't set curriculum, he doesn't have any say in state education. The only thing he can do is an executive order. He's like, okay, or an executive order. Then the other governors in red states like Indiana were like, what is this? What is going on? They're all playing catch up. They're so far behind. They're like, wait, this, we can't have it. Okay, make a bill. We'll put it in here. What could be more grassroots than that chaotic mess? It is proof it's grassroots that it is this disorganized and that it does conflict with their state law. That is literally the proof that it is grassroots, you doofus. If it weren't grassroots, they would have been, they'd be as prepared as you, Mr. I've been at this since 1970 some odd, whatever. Their grassroots have been busy working, raising their kids, doing other things, making your life possible, Mr. Paid with tax dollars.
Right.
He haven't paid attention to any of this because stupid them. Yeah, unfortunately, at this point, stupid them thought they could trust you. Thought they didn't have to worry that their fellow Americans were so adamantly opposed to America that they wanted to brainwash their children into hating it too. Go figure. It's just so funny. So you think this is grassroots, but it's really not grassroots. Well, then it's really disorganized, dark money, isn't it?
Action to social emotional learning and equity, goes out the window pretty quickly. But I can honestly say that I, as an individual interested community psychologist, would not have the ability to detect this. if not for the collaboration of the folks at Committee for Children and many other people.
And you're trained, and you want parents who are not to have the ability to detect and keep track of all this stuff. The guy, what I noticed about these people is they only know how to project. They have no, and they are the least self-aware people you will ever see, ever, anywhere. It's uncanny. They talk about social emotional skills. They have none. Zero.
It's so true, Deb. Zero.
Oh, wait, they don't? Everyone has my value. Wait, they don't? What? Why? Why would they not? It's so confusing. That is a lack of social emotional skill. Yes, other people are other people. I know that's hard for you to understand, sir, but they are.
And so let me end this share.
Thank you.
Can you share this copy? Can we get a copy of this?
Oh, let's get a copy.
Let me make a note.
Dude, it's on the internet. Go to the Indiana State Legislature.
And then, Tom, you can
I can find it in like 2 minutes. I'm not a fancy professor.
Oh no, this was a paper prepared by the guy who, part of that community organization.
This
wasn't the law itself.
An example of the dilemma that we find ourselves in, and the need to consult at a different level than we might otherwise do. This is not so much about education. And the great challenge, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, is finding the common ground that can be a bridge for unity.
Unity? That's gonna be tomorrow's word.
Tomorrow's words of only if you accept their worldview, Deb. Only if you accept their worldview.
Yes. E pluribus unum. E pluribus unum. He forgot the pluribus part.
Let me just ask another question. Have any of you are familiar with this organization called Unite that is headed by Tim Shriver? So
tell us. What do we do, Lisa?
Oh, okay. So Tim Shriver is the board chair of CASTLE. He has two other nonprofits, Unite and the COVID Collaborative, and they work in sync. So in my state of Utah, they came in, they directed COVID policy, and they worked with the Ad Council and lots of other people to push a particular narrative regarding COVID, and also vaccinations and all this other stuff. And then Unite is actually working with other, if anybody wants to go read, I did a 4-article series at the Ohio Press Network. And I literally highlight Unite in there because that is part of the New Pluralists who are trying to create religious pluralism. And they're bringing in all these interfaith organizations to create unity, but that does not include your Judeo-Christian beliefs at all. In fact, they are trying to push people away from doctrine and into this space where just kind of anything goes religiously. Like you can just believe whatever you want. And, it doesn't matter that your doctrine believes that there are two genders. You just need to accept that there is. So Unite is definitely one of those organizations that your audience should watch out for.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's good to know. All right. Let's keep it on.
Tim Shriver, who's the son of Sergeant and Eunice Shriver, which gives him good bona fides, to say the least, started an organization called Unite that has grown dramatically in recent months. And his whole agenda is to try to find common ground around which to bring people together. And, and I think that for those of us in the SEL so-called field, what we're coming to learn is that this emphasis on building skills and what we call participatory competencies and collective efficacy, all that stuff.
Wait, we can't blow by
collective efficacy.
We can't go blow by collective efficacy, and stuff.
No.
I'm writing that down. That's going to be another word.
Collective efficacy.
What is that, parents? What is that? What is collective efficacy? Don't you think you should know what collective efficacy is? All right.
Well, and
Of
here's the deal. Wait about that. So when they talk about collective efficacy and democracy, and one of the things about Unite is that it's really hard pushing with action civics, right? Where they believe kids should, again, we have to protect and worry against threats against our democracy, but they're not talking democracy as in our constitutional republic. They're talking, democracy as in let's do away with the electoral college and have ranked choice voting or the popular vote instead, or let's have people pay reparations. So if you don't toe the line in regard to their beliefs, you're a threat to democracy. Again, it's that whole, you have to become a part of their spiritual view of the spiritual but not religious, non-conforming to your doctrine, or you're not part of the democracy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
climate that has this sense of common ground, shared connection, and when we try to move into the skill building area before we create the climate of kindness and caring and support, we find that the interventions don't stick. You can get them implemented, people will even do them, but the actual impact of them is minimal. And because like so many things that people do, you can do them with intentionality, or you can just do them. And in education right now, there's a lot of just doing because people are in such a survival mode. So we have to be very sensitive to this. And so there's been a lot of strategic conversation about, how does one respond to this? Does one try to present the facts?
That would be good.
No, it's not good, because they're going to present the facts and they're saying, we want to teach SEL with equity because the whole place is white supremacy. And the parents are going to go, we don't want that. And so they're going to go on to say, we need to deceive the parents. Watch.
Yeah, no, I do. At first, I want to thank Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, so much for your super chat. I really, really appreciate it. He says, thank you, Deb and company, for continuing to work to right this ship, which is all but sunk. See, what we're actually not trying to right this ship. We're trying to get people into the lifeboats.
Yeah, because I don't know at this point, it might be lilting too much now. And Deb, I don't know if it can be righted up, but we can at least scream that the ship is sinking and direct people to the lifeboats.
Yes, we're like, lifeboats this way. This is the direct. No, don't go down. No, go over here. Okay. Right. So, and they're busy telling you how you need to choose who goes in the lifeboat based on the color of their skin and stuff, All right. Here we go.
And counter these kinds of things like we're seeing in Indiana with facts, or as you can see from the fact sheet that I showed you before, do we hold up to people their own standards and ask them, what are you for here? So this is an ongoing dilemma.
Am I mistaken in finding him somewhat incoherent?
Well, no. Okay, I can tell you exactly what he's saying. There is what I just said when I was talking about how SEL's already in there. They've already passed laws, Deb, that say you have to teach SEL and you have to teach it with an equity lens. Right. So what they're going to do is just hold up that law and say, hey, listen, you already passed this. You're beholden to it now.
I see. So he's just okay. Got it.
What's interesting, I can't share the document with you, but Jordan Passamentier and his colleagues have done an analysis where they find that in Indiana and Oklahoma in particular, that the main factions in this anti-CRT SEL push are two different factions of the Republican Party. where each one seems to want to out extreme the other because they believe that that's going to be the key to electoral success in the fall. So you see,
We're just parents, dude.
Yeah.
I'm not a Republican. I'm not a political animal. We're just parents. 99% of the people I know who are upset about this garbage are just remember parents, you know, the people that produced the children that you want to change. It's like we don't exist. He's talking about these like politicians, like people in the political in the Republican Party. No, parents.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
this escalation toward extremity because it's believed that will pay off in the fall.
No.
So, you know, it doesn't give us clear direction, but it does give us a lot to think about, talk about. So let me shut up for the moment, and I'm interested in your impressions, reactions, concerns, etc.
Now it gets good. If you thought he was
Feel free to
bad.
unmute.
That lady that's like white supremacy this and white supremacy that.
I'm certainly interested in figuring out how to garner strength in affecting policy. I know my school board is working towards stacking the deck for these kinds of policies. And it's frustrating as a parent to not be able to march in there with all of my data and be like, this is what you need to do. But I have found, at least in, my corner of Wichita, Kansas, that coming at people with facts usually makes them dig in.
Yes, I do not want to teach Marxism to my children. Yes, I want to dig my heels in.
Yeah. Okay. She's like, I want to march in with my data. What data? You don't have data. Okay. You have the data manufactured by Castle and other people because it's a giant circle. We've been down this. You don't have data. You don't even have anecdotal data to support that this is effective. It just makes you feel good, and you like the idea that it's Marxist because y'all are Marxist. But this is I'm so frustrated because they're saying it's facts that make people dig in, but they don't want to tell you what the facts are. They want you to assume that their facts are connected to something called data, and that the data shows that this is helpful, but it doesn't. A, it doesn't exist. B, whatever does exist does not show anything as being helped. All the data that indicates how kids are doing is bad.
Right.
Extremely bad.
Or they use old data, Deb, that maybe show that SEL in some circles did work when it was not transformative. And they use that same data to say then, yeah, transformative SEL is the same benefits.
Well, they also use old data that wasn't transformative SEL, that was not used across the entire school district, that was used selectively with certain behavioral challenges, et cetera, where it was a one-on-one individualized SEL. And they're pretending that is the same thing they're doing when it's not. So it's one or more of all of these things, depending on your district, depending upon your liar and, who's doing it. And this is, what we're dealing with.
And that often, and I think particularly too, not about COVID, that's a separate issue, but like the anti-vaccine sort of information that comes out, parents don't want to believe that they're doing the wrong thing for their kids. So if you come at them with facts that say, well, you are doing the wrong thing for your kids, they're just going to dig in and say, I can't, there's enough cognitive dissonance there that they're not going to change their opinion.
Don't I know it? She's not wrong about that. The only thing is that we are coming at parents and telling them that this stuff is wrong. She wants to go at them and say, if you don't do this, it's wrong. And the poor parents are like, I don't know what.
Right.
anymore. That's why I don't abide, by the way, if you're watching, I don't abide people who come at me on social media and go, it's all the parents' fault. I'm like, no, it's not. They've been lied to for so long and they're products of the same system. And you're really asking a lot. You're really asking a lot here.
So, understanding how we approach this work and finding that underlying commonality so that you can move forward. I think I struggle with that myself as an individual, not just as a practitioner with partners and community work. So I don't know that I added anything to that conversation. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
She added a stench to that conversation.
Other perspectives?
Yeah. So I was reading the article in the Chronicle of Higher Education this morning that explained how Ohio took an alternative approach to some of the anti-CRT sentiment that's rising up through legislation. And there's a group of an alliance of accrediting institutions that came together and just made the point of how the impact of CRT, how it can impact the state universities on an economic level, as well as their credibility and prevent them from getting accredited.
Oh,
and
pause it there.
so I think it's important that when we face
let's dissect that, right? So in order for the college to get accredited, they have to toe the line on CRT. And this is where, when we raise questions about how effective school choice is going to be because of accreditation and things like that, this is exactly what we're talking about, because it doesn't just affect higher ed. Folks like Cognia have changed their accreditation standards that accredit K through 12 to mean that you have to have these equity requirements. So they take all your data, they aggregate it by race. They say, look, your whole district is racist. Now you have to implement all these DEI programs. I mean, that's what happens. And so in order for them to get accredited, again, they can't pass these CRT against CRT laws because it is a requirement for them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for helping us understand that.
these issues, like the counter argument that I've heard from SEL has been really steeped in its impact, on race and diversity and how it's unjust, and we know this. But to make that argument to a group of folks where that might not be their priority anyway, it's like you're not going to elicit any type of empathy from them on that particular point. And so thinking about what are alternative impacts of this legislation that takes the talk and attention away from race and diversity. And it's a really icky thing to have to say, but as someone who has lived the minority experience, you understand that you can't cry racial foul to folks that are committing those type of atrocities against you, because clearly that's not of interest to them. So
racial atrocities.
Mm-hmm.
So she's trying to persuade parents to have CRT in the school, but you can't tell them that they're committing a racial atrocity because that's not of interest to them.
No.
Maybe.
Instead, you have to lie to them or have a different approach, right?
Maybe they're not committing a racial atrocity.
You have to figure out a different way to make your point on a different platform. And I think that's what's missing in the pushback against it. And so when you talk about discomfort, well, what other parts of American history can we discuss that will cause discomfort? I think there are parts of American history that has nothing to do with any type of minority populations that may be here in the country that are still uncomfortable. Anytime you're talking about violence or death, well, how can those come up, and how tightly are we tying the hands of educators to just teach facts, period?
Oh gosh, God forbid we tell those educators to just teach our kids facts and not throw their political opinion in there, right, Deb?
But like, what is it that they want to teach? It's like they're making it so clear they want to editorialize the facts. They want to editorialize. And, we're not saying don't say slavery was bad. Okay. Like, I guess you could say that, like, if it's not self-explanatory when you teach what the facts of slavery, that it's bad, I think we as a culture have much bigger problems. But okay, so you can say it's bad. But what we're saying is, can you stop short at all white people are still racist and nothing has changed since Jim Crow? Can
Right.
you maybe stop short of saying white people today are responsible for what white people did over 100 years ago? You little white child, carry with you in your DNA the burden of that horrible shame. Could you maybe stop short at that? Because I'm
And
thinking
conversely,
without
they say to these Black kids, and you have generational trauma. Therefore, you're never, until you deal with that, until our country fixes itself, you're just going to always carry this trauma with you. I mean, it's like they're victimizing people.
That's right.
And not helping them rise to their best life.
Yeah. Welcome to public school. Here's your CPTSD.
Yeah.
Welcome. I mean, why would you want a child to develop either codependent tendencies, which is what they're trying to get the white kids to do, or the symptoms of CPTSD? And guess what happens if you don't get CPTSD? If your coping mechanism is slightly more maladaptive, you end up a narcissist or somebody with borderline personality disorder or a psychopath, straight up psychopath. So you can, believe it or not, because they're spending 8 hours a day there for 180, 190 days, whatever, you can cultivate these disorders in people who are captive audience for long enough. You just keep giving the messaging over and over and over again that the world is an inhospitable place that hates them, or that they're the people who make it inhospitable, and you're going to get disorders. You're not going to get healthy individuals on the other end of that. And what we're trying to say, people watching, is that this woman is giving you this false dichotomy. It's either don't teach CRT and, oh my God, we can't teach we can't teach anything. We're just, our hands are tied. We can't teach anything about history. Somehow magically, until CRT was invented by Derek Bell, we taught history. Our kids were more literate than they are now.
Yeah.
Percentage of literacy. So she's saying you can't teach the stuff without CRT, or, it's like you have to teach it all the way. No, you don't. There's all kinds of ways to teach history that don't involve CRT.
And so that's what comes up for me. And also the point that one of the problems with SEL and CRT being convoluted, I think, is the confusion between culturally responsive teaching, which is often abbreviated as CRT, and critical race theory.
Because they're the same. There's no difference. Culture responsive teaching is quite literally the same. It's still a critical theory lens applied to teaching.
Yeah.
And then we're in the era of misinformation. And
no one is teaching Derek Bell in the K-12 school. So when we say there's CRT in the school, we're saying this culturally relevant teaching is critical theory. It's teaching through a critical theory lens. Nobody's actually teaching his legal theory. See, this is the theory of misinformation.
If I'm just Googling CRT and I see, CRT, SEL all the time, they're saying CRT is a method, I might think that means critical race theory when it actually refers to cultural responsive teaching. So I think we need to shape the narrative of the truth as well.
Shape the narrative of the truth. There's
one
for you.
Their truth. Yeah.
Shape the narrative of the truth.
Very telling.
Right. I think those are other folks.
Yeah, one thing I keep thinking of is that this is just one piece of a much larger problem. Yeah. I read Heather Cox Richardson every day, and if anybody's not familiar with her, she's a history professor, and she shows the historical roots of all of this and the fact that this is so much more than just critical race theory. It's that ongoing struggle since the start of our country for white supremacy to maintain its hold.
Oh my God.
And it's now been co-opted also. And I think that there are external forces like Russia and others that are using this to help destabilize our country. Just like they're promoting, now they're starting to work to destabilize Canada as well.
What?
Through these trucking things. So I think this is so much part of not only
God forbid.
The US, but I think it's a global movement. And I think it's all based in white supremacy to the extent that this is just one more of the pieces of that. And that's what is mostly concerning me, is that I don't think people are really paying attention to what is going on here and how this is a replay of, you know, the ongoing struggle, not only in our country, but in this world. That the white supremacy is a special problem in this country, but it's also global. And
does she understand most of the world isn't white?
I don't know.
I'm kind of wondering if she understands that demographically, most of the world is not white. Most of the world is not engaged in a white supremacy struggle. It's engaged in a struggle with elite. I'll give you that. It's engaged with a struggle with it where most of those elite are white. I'll grant you that, but it's not because they're white. It's because they're elitists. It's because they're megalomaniacs. It's because, and by the way, they're all leftists, just like you, ma'am. Like you.
Yeah. Well, she must live in her own like sounding board. I just keep thinking like that lady must walk around all day like with a scowl on her face, looking at everybody like she's continually under assault by white supremacy.
I mean, she reads Heather Cox Richardson every single day. Who I just Googled her, and I'm just looking up, you know, what she's all about, and you know, so obviously we disagree. If anybody thinks that white supremacy, now let's be clear, there are white supremacists. Mm-hmm. There are black supremacists. There are La Raza, the race. There are extremist groups. Black Hebrew Israelites. There are groups out there who are terrible. And one of, some of them are in fact white supremacists. But what they're talking about, so I don't want anyone to hear me saying there's no such thing, it doesn't exist. Of course it exists. But what she's saying is it runs the show. It's the reason all white people disagree with anything that she and her friends want to do.
Right.
And by the way, it's not all white people that disagree. There are a lot of people who are far from white. There are a lot of Asian parents. There are a lot of black parents. There are a lot of Hispanic parents. There are a lot of parents who, what we have in common? We actually love our own children and want to raise them ourselves. That's what we have in common. And we have in common that we want our children to grow up to be whatever they want to be individually and to live their individual lives and to achieve at their individual levels and not be held back because they're a little smarter than the guy sitting next to them, not be told they can't go to a given school because they're not brown enough or they're, too privileged because their parents had too much money or whatever. We want to live in the America that our grandparents were promised, which is one that has equality under the law. Now, if you want to find fault with the way our meritocracy is functioning, because organizationally it's FUBAR, because the government runs too much of it, and so it's not really meritocracy, it's more like oligarchy and fascism, I'm with you. We can join hands and fight together. But if you want to sit there and tell me that people based on the melanin content of their skin have certain attitudes towards what you're pushing because we don't want to let go of our power, honey, you live in some kind of weird dystopian novel. You don't live in reality. Get out. Speak to actual people. Talk to actual parents. Mm-hmm. Extend yourself to people. Ask them what makes them tick. Go to a Moms for Liberty meeting and actually introduce yourself to people and say, tell me exactly why you don't like this. I want to understand. But you don't want to understand. You're just a bully with a meek voice. Sorry, I get off on these little rants. I apologize.
It's totally
I'm not sure what the answer is. I just think that paying attention to that larger picture as well and understanding that, all of these extreme politicians are actually playing out a much bigger agenda.
Right. I think that's it's such an important point, and I think it also underscores the fact that we're not going to find any fast answers here. That we're looking at the in many ways what I believe is sort of the extended last gasp of an outmoded ideology, shall we say?
Like a constitutional republic.
Outmoded ideology, Western Enlightenment, Western civilization. It's outmoded, you guys. It's so outmoded. I would like to know where they want to go. What?
I said, America is so yesterday.
It's so, there's this larger agenda, but we want to be exactly what UNESCO wants us to be. That's not a larger agenda. We're following in lockstep with their, with their sustainable development goals and ESG and everything else. We're marching like good little automatons to the beat of the Truman Show drum. But we got to worry about the other agenda thing, the imaginary one that we made up to make ourselves feel like good people for following this one.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And it's not going to go easily or quickly. But I do believe that our kids are the education of our kids is an essential piece of this.
They're not your kids; they're our kids.
No.
And so, whether we call it social emotional learning or not, the idea of building the capacity of our future citizens to think critically, carefully, with nuance and detail.
You don't want that.
No, they want them to think with a critical consciousness.
That's right.
That's what they mean.
That's right. You don't want that. Because you know what, sir? We are thinking critically, meaning like we are using analysis to look at the evidence of what it is that you want and what you're saying. And we are actually translating your gobbledygook into plain English. And because we're using reasoning and we're identifying all of your logical fallacies, didn't need the book. I teach the book privately to students who are amazed and very clever, because when I teach this to my students, they're like, I heard that on the TV the other day. I heard that all the time. Like, good for you. Yeah, kids can learn a lot when you actually teach them, but you don't want them to learn this. You don't want them to know these, because if they did, they could point out the fallacies in all your stupid arguments like 1619 project, critical race theory, culture relevant education, white supremacy. They would know that you're full of crap, and you don't want that actually at all.
Is going to be an important part of emerging from this. I see we got a couple of hands up. How about our 908-531 hand?
Hi, Dr. Elias. Hi, this is Jody Michak. I was a graduate of community psych at Penn State, and I am currently at United Way of Northern New Jersey, where, for a while we were working with you and Liz Warner to bring this theory to the schools in Northern New Jersey. So thank you. It's wonderful to be with you again. I wonder, though, from what I've been hearing, I wonder, and I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, so I'm starting to get back into the sphere from a different vantage point. But I wonder if what we're seeing is an outcome that we weren't planning on, but a positive outcome, right? I mean, we're working with a generation, right? SEL, from my understanding in the schools, is new. So we have a generation that then is going home and talking to their parents about it, and it's the parents that seem to be outraged, right? So that the parents hadn't been exposed to this, and it's the first time they're being exposed. And so I think, to the previous point of people feeling as if they are losing power because of the information that's coming home with their children. And so I wonder if it's almost a positive outcome that we're seeing it. The children talk about it and they're bringing it home. It's the generation that didn't get this information that's having a problem with it. And so, if the effort.
Do you hear what's happening? We're all going to be diagnosed as having no emotional skills we're all problematic because we didn't get the benefit of their wonderful wisdom or whatever. Somehow we managed to, go to the moon and build the most powerful nation in the history of mankind and lift more people on the planet, not just the United States, on the planet, up out of poverty with innovations and technology and all kinds of things. But no, surely we didn't really succeed because of this. Meanwhile, 70% of our kids are illiterate.
Right.
Can't make change. They stare at their phones all day. They're cutting themselves. They want to mutilate themselves. But it's so great. It's so wonderful that this generation is coming on. You know why we're outraged? We're out. The power that we're afraid of losing. It's not power. Power is not the right word. We're afraid of losing our relationships with our children. We're afraid of our children losing their proper relationship with reality and with themselves. We're afraid of you co-opting their identity for political purposes. We're outraged at you seizing their personal power for your political agenda. That's why we're outraged. We're not I'm losing some white power I don't freaking have.
No.
Where is it? I was absent that day. I didn't get it. My check's lost in the mail.
That needs to persist over generations. That what we're feeling now is uncomfortable, but we need to feel uncomfortable in order for there to be movement and change.
We're just going to beat you into submission, basically.
For a few more generations, could we, moving the needle slightly, be the success that we're looking for?
That is a classic community psychology question, really. Right? How to move that needle.
How to move that needle. How to manipulate large groups of people. A classic community psychology question.
Fast or slow. Mariah?
Yeah, thanks for this conversation. I really appreciate all the points folks are raising. I wonder if, also taking a community psychology lens and thinking from an assets approach, like what are the communities that are being able to organize and educate around social emotional learning and inform folks and policymakers around,
I hate the word folks.
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys, when you hear the word folks, that's one of these words, these Marxist words. There are bunches of words, but folks is definitely from them. We don't use folks in like regular people language.
What a value social emotional learning is to youth development and positive youth development. And so understanding like what are the coalitions in place, what are the networks, agencies, conditions within that community that are creating those counter narratives to occur.
Counter narratives. And we're the bad guys who are not really grassroots.
And tracking that to learn lessons there could also be kind of an important way to understand how this is happening and how folks are organizing around this. And then I think there's becomes this question that we're thinking of, is it framing? And I think like there's some great ideas about how to frame it. Is it who you're connected to? Is it kind of a combination of these that are, successful strategies and at least educating and allowing that counter narrative to occur?
Right. Tom.
I want to follow up on what Mariah said, because it's what I've been thinking all along. You tell the story about, what did you call it? The Committee for Children. And what they're doing is they're not, going and they're not just presenting information, they're organized. And that.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Grassroots, totally.
In the front. They're activists. They're lobbyists. Tell the story of them. They're organizing. They're doing it, whatever. And here's the thing, guys. I want you to learn from these people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just showing this so you can see and be horrified or whatever. Learn the lesson. Organize.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not part of a Moms for Liberty, chapter or some similar kind of organization, join one. Start one. Do something. Get a group of people. Look at Lisa's been writing and doing all these things. Like do something and get organized. The reason these people are winning, the reason they're in all of these institutions, the reason they have so much power, the reason they're getting billions of dollars of our taxpayer money is they are exceedingly well organized. And when they get together and they talk about, damn, Our messaging isn't getting through. Oh, it's not my video. My video's out of touch with my voice. Okay, sorry. I just got to.
Yeah, it's been breaking up a little, just so you know.
Yeah, I think something might be up with the connection with my broadband, because I see that the little Wi-Fi signals come on and I don't know why, because I don't use Wi-Fi. I'm hardwired. Well,
But I can hear what you're saying and what the video is saying perfectly fine.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'll try to slow down and maybe it won't be so broken. But I see. The main point is that they're telling you what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying lie. Okay, so I don't agree with that. I don't agree with like what should the narrative be and how do we lie to people. Don't ever lie. Don't become them to do this, but do the things they do, because if you don't, there's a big vacuum there. Because we are grassroots. They're lying about us. They're lying to each other. They're lying to themselves. But they lie to themselves so they can continue to get money to keep organizing. Because if the people who were donating all this money to them didn't believe that they were up against these dark forces of the far right wing white supremacist Nazis, they might be not so free with their pocketbooks.
Right.
So they keep lying. There is no such organization. There is no such far right-wing conspiracy or whatever. It's just a bunch of parents who are very scared for their kids and they're frustrated, and our kids are prisoners of this system. And until we leave, which I advocate for people to do, but he's telling you what to do. And I hope y'all will listen.
Well, and I want to make one more point too, Deb, is that CASEL themselves, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning that was mentioned earlier, that did this whole transformative SEL, that got the target on the back of SEL, they have launched a disinformation/misinformation campaign called #LeadingWithSEL. And so they're literally trying to get parents to buy into the lie that, oh, SEL is perfectly fine, and organizing parents on the ground to write op-eds for newspapers, to advocate at the school district, to, literally, put posts out there with #LeadingWithSEL. So, I would go to that website, see what CASEL is doing, and then replicate that in your district. You need to
100%.
be able to disseminate information. That's the whole reason why I started my Twitter and why I started my YouTube channel, because how do I get this information that I know, that my small group of people around me know in my district? Because I went to people's houses and I had cottage meetings, and I said, hey, you invite 10 friends and I'll come and talk to them about what this is about. We have to really start, it's hard because as people who are on the right, especially, I feel, we just want to be left alone. We just government, leave us alone. But guess what? You're going to have to take time and energy to fight this. You can't just let someone else do it for you. So I would just say to your audience, Deb, follow those same kinds of trajectories that they're telling these parents at the grassroots level to do to promote SEL. Help people know what this is really about.
That's right. Absolutely correct. You've got to build community. And I personally think you're going to have an easier time of it if your child is not in the school. You can pull your child out and do this after you do that. In fact, it will be easier for you to do that because you don't have to worry about your child facing retribution or anything inside the school. So you'll be able to breathe easier. You're not going to have to be fighting them on two fronts. And you'll be closer with your child. You'll have a closer bond. Because they're going to see you working hard for them, and you're setting a great example. And by the way, teaching some fabulous social and emotional skills, because they're going to see you talking to neighbors and talking to friends and getting together with people and organizing for a good cause. And what better way to teach your kids how to get along with other people? So, it's kind of ironic, but that's what they do. And they're just better at it.
That we tend not to do. We tend to, present the information. They say you didn't understand it the first time, but they hit you over the head the third time with it, and then they still don't get it, because this is not about information. It's about power. And
did you hear it?
Yeah, I heard.
There it was. It's not about information, about power.
And when you said, "Are we on the last gasp?" and I said, I'm thinking to myself, what, white supremacy or democracy? Because it teeters. I'm not too sure what we're on the last gasp
We're not a democracy. We're a republic.
Amen,
Democracy itself is not a net good. They had democracy in Iraq under Saddam. They all voted for him.
It's mob rule.
That's right.
Here. And it seems to me that this is something that we as a profession needs to take on in terms of where's SCRA in mobilizing around supporting, because it's everything. If it's SEL and CRT, let me tell you, there's nothing else everything else in community psychology that'll fall under the umbrella next. And we don't have a lot of experience or skill or leadership in organizing, but we absolutely need to if we're going to survive this. So I like what Mariah said, which is look at the assets, look who's doing it. You gave us an example with the committees for children, and how do we go about organizing and becoming very sophisticated on legislative issues. When I did coalition building in Massachusetts, we did it hand in hand with the legislators. We could never have gotten anywhere because cognitively no one wanted to do what we were doing. But when they became our allies, we could get things done. So yeah, is that part of the message now coming out?
But it's bad when Republicans do it. When the legislators became their allies, they could get stuff done. Is different from, well, they think they could win elections on this issue somehow, kind of way.
And notice, Deb, right? Who's pushing the social emotional learning the most? A lot of these first ladies in red states with Republican governors. So I just think that that's something we have to start educating people about, because they clearly don't have the right idea about what SEL is.
Well, the irony of all this is, as they bemoan the white supremacy of our country, it is exactly the patronizing, oh, the little poor kids don't have social skills. They deserve this because they won't be getting it at home. I mean, I hope parents out there hear this and are like, bitch, please. You don't know me. You don't know what I teach my kids at home. But that's part of where it comes from. It comes from this noblesse oblige, progressive. We know what everyone needs and what's best for everyone. And surely the people who live differently than us also do everything wrong.
Right. And we need to provide all the services for these kids that don't have it when we have the social services. And it should not be connected to the schools.
Exactly.
The committees for children to organize. I mean, look what the truckers did. A handful of imported truckers, the Canadian truckers don't agree with them, have shut down a country.
What?
No, I think organization, certainly SEL
making up stuff now,
is based on that premise of creating these statewide alliances. It's very funny when I teach community psychology to my undergraduates and they read community psych textbooks and we talk about these various issues, they always ask, well, why haven't community psychologists gotten together and solved these issues? I mean, they think that there are tens of thousands of community psychologists waiting to end homelessness and to end poverty and racism. And I hate to burst their bubble, and I say, well, they're not that many. They're not that many.
Even if there were, that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
No, definitely not.
You get the impression is people don't realize that human beings make decisions on their own and can say no. Like, they can say no. We're not going to be sent to the gulag if we don't do what he tells us to do. There are homeless people who are, you go and you try to tell me you should, let's put you in rehab. You shouldn't be using drugs. And then you can get off the street. No.
Yeah.
Okay. No, you can't fix that. What are you going to do?
Of the folks. But I think it's, it's not easy for people to engage in intentional collaboration that is different than the collaborations they've been doing. And I mean, I would say, honestly, for any community psychologist who's interested in these issues specifically, they should be looking to SEL for US, and especially one of the 20 states that are involved. And if they're really thinking about it, help a state that doesn't have an SEL for US affiliate get one. In fact, right now, there's work going on in Colorado. There's work going on in Montana and several other states that one might not automatically expect to help them develop state alliances. And I think it is important to publicize where things are being successful. For example, there's something that operates out of character.org called the National Schools of Character Program. And National Schools of Character Program has been in operation for well over a decade. And there are numerous schools around the country that are called national, designated, labeled, recognized as National Schools of Character. And these are schools that implicitly are doing SEL. And in some cases, explicitly doing SEL. And they can be found in every
Hold
state.
up there. Hold up. Did you hear him say that?
And, you know,
sorry, I was looking something up. Should I go
Yeah.
back?
So no, he was just saying there are some states that are implicitly doing SEL and some states that are explicitly doing it. So even if you haven't adopted as a state necessarily, they'll say, oh, we're not teaching SEL. They might be doing it behind your back.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So I know you have a hard stop in 5 minutes. Is that right? So
Yes.
where do you want me to go? Because I want to make sure to get your feedback on as much of this as possible. Is there anything else you want me to skip to from these clips down here?
No, honestly, there's not much of importance after this. I mean, basically he says, you know, a lot of us kind of stay in our silos and do work with like some global news publication that they have, but as these social psychologists, whatever they call them, community psychologists, they need to kind of think out of the box. And this is where you can kind of start talking about how they kind of create this narrative. Like this guy, Elias, he wrote a paper for like a local publication in New Jersey, and it was all in support of SEL. And so you see how like they kind of use things like that to drum up support, just like the Walton Family Foundation, for instance, published a paper here in Utah during the pandemic, how school choice just wasn't equitable enough. And they used money they gave to grants to a publication to write for the Deseret News to actually write that paper. And so it was laying the groundwork for public policy that they want to push. And the same thing happens here with SEL. They create their own research studies, they put out their publications, they do all these things. And like I said, later on, I think the only thing of note that he says later is that, yeah, we don't have the same power to organize and to push public policy at the state level as like the teachers union. So we really need to get the teachers unions to start adopting this whole, we need to adopt SEL push so that they can basically use their political power to get it into the school districts.
Right. I just want to bring this up that on his page with Rutgers, he says he's a clinical psychologist. This is, I wanted to show you guys community psychology, social justice through collaborative research and action. So that's what community psychology is. Community psychology is just a fancy term for social justice through collaborative research and action. This is this, SCRA that they're talking about. And the part that Lisa's talking about with the video itself is the part down here. If you decide you're interested in what, I'll put the link to it in the chat. But if you want to keep going, I think what you're talking about here is the lack of power section.
Yeah.
Right. So this little clip is going to be where he's talking about getting the union involved. For those who are watching from Charlotte, North Carolina, that's where she is.
Watch that lady.
You're definitely going to want to watch this charming individual and what she talks about our lovely, our district. And she's not from here. And she sort of bemoans that, she's from New Jersey. So she's from his neck of the woods and just, oh gosh, North Carolina, we're not woken up yet. Right. And, so then it goes on. So these are the clips that we didn't get to. Okay. Participatory approach, lack of power, sharing knowledge. So you can, if you're so inclined, as I said earlier, when I was getting this, I was preparing to do this, I said, a great risk to my sanity. I'm going to and going to watch this. But it wouldn't have been as much fun without you, Lisa, or as informative, certainly, because you are an expert on this as well. So I hope you guys have found this useful. I'm sorry we didn't get to go through all of it, but I do want to let Lisa go. She's been so kind to join us. And the rest of it is really just kind of more of the same. They're telling you what they're doing. It's implicit, not always explicit. It's in there. It's in the sauce. You're dark money white supremacist organizers, but they're not. They're just the salt of the earth, whatever, activists. They just want to help. All kids deserve this. So we have to get smarter. We have to organize. Don't lie. You don't need to lie. The truth speaks for itself. The truth about SEL is right out there for all the world to see.
Yeah, maybe we need to get parents to organize and actually put truth out there about SEL. I've actually set my targets on that organization in Castle specifically. They have videos out there where they're talking about white supremacy and what all this stuff does. We should just take these clips, put them on the internet, and then tag #leading with SEL. Get people to know the truth.
Yeah. I mean, really, if you put a montage, somebody out there who's really good at editing clips and so forth, if you took all the little clips of them going, it's white people who don't want to lose their power. It's white people. It's white people. It's, it's racist. It's this, it's that, it's the other. And then you were like, as leading with SEL, it's going to become very clear. It is CRT, repowering, something else. It's bigger. It's worse. It's a religion. I shouldn't say it's a cult. It is a cult belief grounded in unreality. These people, I think, live in some kind of weird alternate universe. They don't get out and speak to actual humans. And they read too many books, and not the right kind of books. They read books about the things they already agree with. So that reinforces what they already think, and they think it's true, and they don't speak to actual humans who live on this actual planet. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. If anyone is really good at those kind of clips, I would recommend it.
I don't know if I'm great at it, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try to put together like a full-on clip series of all the bad things that they've said.
Yeah, I think it would be worthwhile. So thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for sticking around with us. And please like, share, subscribe. Also check out Parents of Patriots, Lisa's channel. She's at I Am Lisa Logan on Twitter. Follow her, follow me if you don't already. And we will catch you next time. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks.